Good day. Two texts coming in, seconds apart. The bloody stadium's destroying the state. Let's hope this madness stops. That's from Peter this morning. And Rod the truckie says, no Tasmanian stadium equals no future Tasmanians. So there you go. Two sides of a story that we learned a bit more about yesterday as the government released its proposed legislation that would give it enormous power, effectively ownership of pretty much everything happens. The success, the failures of managing the challenges with little or no review into a proposed stadium at Macquarie Point. It's the question we asked earlier. Can the government build a thriving home for a footy team for Tasmania, a place that roars on game day and has a buzz around it the rest of the year? Cricket events, concerts, an activity for tourists and shoppers. Can they manage that? I know lots of you hope that they can, and others are sceptical about it. I wonder what Bec Thomas, the independent MLC for Elwick, learned yesterday about the process and where we go for here. Bec Thomas joined us a week ago to have or be part of the great stadium debate, and we heard some of the issues that she still wants answered before this proposal will get her support in Tasmania's upper house. Bec Thomas, good morning to you.
Good morning, Leon.
From what we learned yesterday, have any of your questions about the proposed stadium been answered?
Oh, look, some of them have, but I certainly still have many more questions, and I'm sure I'll have even more once I get my head around reading and get an opportunity to read the 140-page report and the 60-page bill plus the permit documentation, which I know includes over 40 conditions. So lots of reading and consideration for me to still do before I form a position on this, that's for sure.
One of the issues that you've been raising is an understanding of the actual cost of the stadium and then the business model that the stadium would operate under to pay that back over time. What we learnt yesterday was $945 million is the new cost for the stadium. And as Chris Rowbottom points out in some of his reporting, there are still lots of additions to go around that to make a stadium actually work. What did you think when you saw that new number?
Oh, look, it wasn't a surprise to me, Leon. We've seen estimates anywhere from, 750 million up to 1.5 billion. And the reality is we won't know the final cost until we have design and construct plans. That's going to be well down the track and well after we as a parliament are asked to vote on the development permit. It's like when you build a house, you might get a DA, you might get a development permit issued, but you won't perhaps know the actual cost until you've got design and construct plans and a building permit ready to go. So that I think we have to expect that there is going to be uncertainty surrounding the final cost for some time yet. I expect in tomorrow's budget the government will need to be clear about some of those other projects that are associated with the stadium and how they are factored into the budget. And they're all additional costs, really.
Let's talk about one of those that has been a particular passion project for you over time, particularly in your former role as Mayor of Glenorchy. Could this stadium project be the incentive to get a public transport corridor on the old rail lines through the northern suburbs delivered?
No, look, Leon, I think it's a bit sad to say that perhaps we'd need a stadium to be built to finally get action on the northern suburbs transit corridor. There's been evidence-based need, and it's the most overstudied project in the history of transport projects. There's been endless studies to say the benefits that it can bring, and look, I just really want to see the government get on with this. I have had a briefing recently, and I asked a question in our LegCo question time yesterday of the government about where the strategic business case is at, because last year in estimates we were told that it would be prepared by early 2025. It's now past early 2025, and now we're hearing that the strategic business case will be finalised in mid this year, and then that will enable the government to seek additional funding from the federal government to deliver a transport solution on the corridor. So I'm hopeful that that is happening regardless, but of course I think the more infrastructure around the place, the more incentive there will be for the federal government to invest money here in an area, in an electorate that has long been deprived of the funding allocations that it deserves, given 40% of Tasmanians live in Greater Hobart and compared to other electorates around Tasmania.
If this bill gets passed, if you vote to support it, amongst others, the government end up with massive power in delivering this project with relatively little or no, in some cases, restraint. Could that be a good thing for getting this done?
Leon, the governance of the delivery of the project will be critical, and it's one of my critical considerations in looking at the bill, and particularly the sign-off of conditions. The governance that's proposed for the sign-off of conditions is something I'll be heavily scrutinising, and I think the Parliament will be really interested in as we go through the consideration of the bill. It's critical that there is proper oversight and accountability on the government in delivering on this, in signing off on the conditions and delivering on this if it does get supported. The last thing Tasmanians need is the embarrassment of another, and financial implications of another Spirit saga. So the governance will be critical, and that's one of my outstanding questions and considerations, together with the operating model of the stadium, which is going to be critical. Is it going to be a viable business entity? What's it going to cost the taxpayer ongoing?
And it'll be interesting to see, and this will be a question for Anne Beach. We're hoping that she'll join us in the days ahead. It looks like Macquarie Point Development Corporation will end up carrying hundreds of millions of dollars of debt on its books. The initially forecast $85 million that the government points to was to be laid off against future land sales or commercial opportunities, but hundreds of millions of dollars. One wonders how that will be paid back, Bec Thomas.
Yes, absolutely. But just as importantly, and something that's not been talked about as much, is the ongoing operating costs and the costs that will be on Stadiums Tasmania's books to run this asset year on year, and what are going to be the implications for Stadiums Tasmania as a statutory authority of the government ongoing. So I think that's a really critical point, and I will be hoping that Stadiums Tasmania will release their operating model for the stadium pretty soon, so that will help inform our decision making.
I said in my introduction, and it's a place that many people will be hoping that we get to, that a stadium gets built that becomes a thriving home for a footy team in Tasmania that absolutely roars on game day. And York Park benefits as well, with Tasmanians and visitors from the mainland pouring into the stadium to celebrate and get around a team of our own. And that brings all of the other stuff around it, conferences and tourism and activities around the site. Do you think yesterday was, or how do you view yesterday as a moment to getting us to that place, to that positive vision?
Well, Leon, I've continually said that if I'm making a decision with my heart, I want a team, I want a stadium. I think we deserve to have an AFL team. It's long overdue, and we deserve to have the infrastructure that other states have. We shouldn't be the poor cousin of the mainland. However, we've got to be assured as parliamentarians here that we're not going to be sending our future generations broke by making this significant decision, and that it is from a technical planning perspective, a viable site to build a stadium on. Now, what the Parliament's being asked to do, whilst the rhetoric around the community and the debate is all about just yes, no stadium, what we're being asked to decide on is a planning permit, considering whether technically developing a 23,000-seat roof stadium at Macquarie Point is a viable planning proposition. And, we're not planning experts. We need advice to inform our decision-making, and that's, I guess, what's been revealed yesterday was that given the government's abandoned the POS process, we knew we weren't going to be receiving advice from the TPC to inform our decision making. Now we know the advice is coming from government agencies. DPAC has prepared a report which together with government agencies and regulatory authorities, have considered the 141 key issues raised in the draft integrated assessment report. They've considered the representations made to the TPC, and they've provided advice and recommendations on conditions accordingly in this overarching report, and that's what we are being asked to make our decision based on. So the objectivity of that advice, given it's coming from government agencies, is something that I'll be considering as well.
It's going to be a fascinating time. Of course, a huge week in Parliament. We've got the budget being delivered tomorrow, all the deliberations around that. And then in 2.5 weeks, this bill, we'll see what the public consultation says, and then it'll start being debated in Tasmania's lower and upper house. Bec Thomas, good to talk to you this morning.
Thanks, Leon. Have a great day.
If you'd like to join us too, 1300 222 936.